"We saved him, now he is our beloved husband," said the three Apache women about the widowed cowboy. The man had not planned to die on that trail, but by the time the sun climbed high over the dry hills, death felt closer than life. He lay half on his side, half on his back, where his horse had thrown him hours earlier. The animal was gone, frightened away by gunfire and chaos. Dust clung to the man's clothes. His hat lay several feet away, crushed and useless. Blood had dried along his temple and soaked into his shirt where a bullet had grazed his shoulder. Every breath hurt. His name was Eli Walker, and not long ago, he had been a man with a home. Eli had once lived on a small ranch near the edge of a growing settlement. He worked hard, rose before sunrise, and returned home each evening to a woman who smiled even on the worst days. Her name was Sarah. She had been his world. They had no children, but they had plans, quiet ones, simple ones, a larger house, a few more cattle. A life built slowly, honestly. Then sickness came. It did not arrive like a storm. It came softly, settling into Sarah's body until she grew weaker with each passing week. Eli did everything he could. He rode for doctors, paid what little money he had, prayed in ways he never had before. None of it mattered. One cold morning she did not wake up. After that, the ranch felt empty, too quiet. Eli sold what he could and took work as a traveling cowboy, moving cattle from place to place, never staying long. He thought movement might keep the pain away. It did not. Grief rode with him, heavy and constant. The job that led him onto the trail near Apache land was supposed to be simple. Escort cattle, avoid trouble, return with pay, but trouble did not ask permission. Gunshots rang out suddenly from behind a rocky rise. Men shouted, horses screamed. Eli barely had time to turn before a sharp pain burned through his shoulder. His horse reared, panicked, and threw him hard onto the ground. The world spun. More shots followed, then silence. When Eli opened his eyes again, the sun was already sinking. The attackers, whether bandits or worse, were gone. So was his horse. He tried to stand but failed. His leg would not move properly, and his head throbbed with every breath. He crawled instead, dragging himself toward a cluster of rocks for shade. By nightfall, he could no longer move at all. He thought of Sarah. Not the way she looked at the end, but the way she laughed when he told bad jokes. The way she stood in the doorway when he returned from long days of work. He wondered if he would see her again soon. The thought brought him both comfort and fear. Morning came slowly. Heat settled over the land like a heavy blanket. Eli's mouth was dry, his vision blurred. He knew enough about the desert to understand what was happening. Without water, without help, he would not last another day. He did not pray for rescue. He did not have the strength. He simply waited. That was when the shadows fell across him. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light. Then he heard soft footsteps and low voices speaking a language he did not understand. His eyes fluttered open. 3 women stood nearby. They did not look like the people from his past. Their clothing was different, made for travel and survival. Their hair was dark and braided. Their eyes were sharp but calm. Apache women. Fear shot through him, weak but real. He had heard stories, most of them cruel and untrue. He tried to speak, to explain, but only a dry sound came from his throat. One of the women stepped closer. She was the eldest, her face marked by years of sun and hardship. She crouched down and studied his wounds carefully, not with anger, but with focus. Another woman, younger and quieter, held a water skin. The third stood watch, scanning the horizon. The elder woman spoke softly to the others. After a brief exchange, the younger woman knelt and pressed the water skin gently to Eli's lips. He drank without thinking. Cool water spilled into his mouth, bringing sharp relief. Tears filled his eyes as he swallowed. He had expected nothing. This felt like mercy. They did not remove his weapons. They did not threaten him. Instead, they worked quickly and carefully. The elder woman cleaned his shoulder wound using herbs. The younger one wrapped it with practiced hands. The third woman helped lift him, supporting his weight as if she had done this many times before. Eli faded in and out of consciousness as they moved him. He did not know where they were taking him. He only knew that hands were holding him, steady and strong. When he woke again, he was no longer under the open sky. He lay inside a shelter made of natural materials, cool and shaded. A small fire burned nearby. The smell of herbs filled the air. His body ached, but the sharp edge of pain had softened. The women were there. The eldest introduced herself slowly, pointing to her chest. Nea. The youngest was called Taza. The third, tall and watchful, was Kiona. Eli tried to say his name. It came out rough, but they listened. Communication was slow. Words were few, but care did not need language. Days passed. They fed him small portions of food and water. They changed his bandages. They helped him sit, then stand. Each movement hurt, but he did not complain. He had learned long ago that pain was easier to bear than loss. At night, when the desert cooled, Eli lay awake listening to the sounds outside. He expected anger. He expected danger. Instead, he found quiet, safety. The women did not treat him like a prisoner. They did not treat him like a burden. They treated him like a man who had been close to death. Slowly, trust formed. Eli noticed things as his strength returned. Nea carried herself with quiet authority. She had lost a husband years earlier, taken by violence that had left her hardened but not cruel. Kiona had once been forced from her homeland. She rarely spoke, but her actions showed loyalty and strength. Taza, the youngest, had lost family to sickness, much like Eli had lost Sarah. Pain recognized pain. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky red, Eli sat outside the shelter, wrapped in a blanket. Nea sat nearby, watching the horizon. After a long silence, Eli pressed his hand to his chest and spoke Sarah's name. Nea did not understand the word, but she understood the meaning. She placed her hand over her heart and nodded. That was the moment Eli realized something important. These women had not just saved his body. They had seen his broken spirit and chosen not to turn away. He did not know what the future held. He did not know if he would ever return to the life he once knew. But for the first time since Sarah's death, he felt something new. Not hope exactly, but the possibility of it. And that possibility began there, in the quiet desert, with 3 women who had chosen compassion over fear, and a widowed cowboy who was no longer alone. Eli's body healed faster than his heart, but each new day made the pain a little easier to carry. By the second week, he could walk short distances without support. His shoulder still ached and his leg was stiff, but the sharp weakness was gone. The women watched him closely, never rushing him, never letting him push too hard. They had seen enough broken people to know that healing could not be forced. Life around him moved with quiet rhythm. At sunrise, Kiona left the camp to check traps or scout the area. Taza gathered plants and roots, often returning with bundles tied neatly in cloth. Nea tended the fire, prepared food, and watched everything with calm eyes that missed very little. Eli began to help where he could. At first it was small things, fetching water, stacking wood, cleaning tools. Each task made him feel useful again. After months of drifting with no purpose, even simple work gave him a sense of grounding. Words between them were still limited, but understanding grew through actions. When Eli struggled, someone was always there, steadying him without making him feel weak. When he grew quiet, lost in thought, they did not press him to speak. One afternoon, while sitting near the fire, Eli noticed Taza watching him closely. She was curious, not afraid. She handed him a small carved object made from wood, a simple horse. He took it gently, surprised. He smiled for the first time in a long while. He pointed to the carving, then to the horizon, and made a slow walking motion with his fingers. Taza laughed softly, understanding. She pointed to the horse, then to him, and nodded. It was not much, but it felt like connection. As days passed, Eli learned more about their way of life. They moved with the land, not against it. They took only what they needed. Every action had purpose. Every person mattered. In return, Eli shared small parts of his world. He showed them how to mend leather using tools from his saddlebag. He fixed a broken strap using knots learned from years of working cattle. Kiona watched closely and repeated the movements until she could do it herself. Respect grew on both sides. At night, stories were shared around the fire, not always with words. Sometimes Nea traced shapes in the dirt, pointing to stars, then to her chest, then to the ground. Eli understood she was speaking of her past, of people she had lost, of land that carried memory. When it was his turn, Eli spoke quietly, using simple words and gestures. He spoke Sarah's name again. He described a small house, a field, a woman waiting in the doorway. His voice shook, but he did not stop. No one interrupted him. No one looked away. That night, after the fire died down, Eli realized something had changed. He was no longer waiting for death. He was living through the days, not just surviving them. But the outside world did not stop moving. One morning, Kiona returned earlier than usual, her expression tense. She spoke quickly to Nea. The mood in the camp shifted. Nea looked toward Eli, then back at Kiona. Eli felt the unease even before he understood the reason. Later that day, Eli heard distant sounds, faint but familiar, hooves, voices carried by the wind. settlers or patrol riders moving through the area. Fear tightened his chest. He knew what could happen if he was found here. He also knew what danger the women could face for helping him. The stories worked both ways, and fear often led to violence. That night, Eli barely slept. Before dawn, he rose quietly and gathered his things. His movements were slow but determined. When Naya noticed him, she stood and blocked his path. Eli tried to explain. He pointed to the distance, then to himself, then made a motion of leaving. He touched his chest and shook his head, then pointed to them, shaking his head again. He did not want trouble to find them. Naya listened carefully. When he finished, she spoke firmly. Her voice was calm but strong. She pointed to the ground beneath them, then to him, then placed her hand flat over her heart. She was telling him this was not just his choice. Taza stepped forward and placed his blanket back over his shoulders. Kiona stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes steady. They were not sending him away. Eli felt something break inside him, not pain but relief. He nodded slowly, accepting what they were offering, protection but also responsibility. From that day on, they moved camp more often. They avoided open trails. Eli followed their lead, learning how to read signs in the land he had once passed through without noticing. He learned how silence could speak, how patience could be strength. One afternoon, while gathering water, Eli slipped on loose stone and fell. The pain in his leg returned sharply and frustration burned in his chest. He struck the ground with his fist, angry at his weakness. Kiona reached him first. She did not scold him. She crouched beside him, met his eyes, and slowly shook her head. Then she pointed to her own leg and mimicked a limp. She, too, carried old injuries. Eli laughed weakly. The anger faded. That evening, Naya showed him a scar on her arm, old and faded. She touched it, then her chest, then smiled slightly. Pain, she was saying, does not decide who we are. Eli carried those words with him, even without language. As weeks turned into months, the bond between them deepened. It was not rushed. It was not demanded. It grew the way strong things often do, slowly, quietly, built on trust. Eli no longer thought of himself as a guest. He thought of himself as someone who belonged, even if the world beyond the hills would never understand. Still, questions lingered in his mind. What future could he have here? What place could he truly hold? One evening, as they shared food near the fire, Naya placed something in front of him. It was a small piece of leather, carefully marked with symbols. She pointed to each symbol, then to him, then to the group. Eli did not fully understand, but he understood enough. They were offering him a place, not as someone passing through, but as someone connected to their lives. His throat tightened. He nodded slowly, respectfully, knowing this was not something to take lightly. The widowed cowboy who had once drifted without purpose now stood at the edge of a choice he never imagined. Not one of escape, but of belonging. And as the fire crackled softly under the open sky, Eli felt the weight of the past loosen its grip, just a little, as something new began to take shape. Change did not come all at once. It arrived quietly, like the first light before sunrise. Eli noticed it in small moments. The way his steps felt more sure on the rocky ground, the way his hands moved with confidence again when working with tools, the way his chest no longer felt heavy every time he thought of his past. The pain was still there, but it no longer ruled him. The women noticed too. Kiona began inviting him to walk farther from camp. She showed him how to read the land, broken branches, marks in the soil, stones placed in ways that told stories to those who knew how to look. Eli listened closely. For years, he had believed strength came from speed and force. Now he was learning that awareness mattered just as much. Taza spent more time with him during the day. She asked questions using gestures, sometimes words she had learned from traders long ago. Eli answered slowly, choosing simple language. They laughed often, especially when words failed and meaning had to be found another way. Naya watched it all with careful eyes. She did not rush anything. She had lived long enough to know that deep bonds formed best when given time. Still, she felt the shift. Eli was no longer just a man they had saved. He was part of their daily rhythm. His presence mattered. One evening, after a long day of travel, Eli sat alone near the edge of camp. The sky was filled with stars, brighter than he remembered from his old life. He traced shapes in the dirt, lost in thought. He thought of Sarah again, not with sharp pain this time, but with quiet memory. He wondered what she would think of where he was now. The question had no answer, but it did not trouble him as much as it once had. Naya approached and sat beside him. She followed his gaze to the sky. After a moment, she pointed to a cluster of stars, then to him, then made a slow circle with her hand. Time moves. Life changes. Eli nodded. He pressed his hand to his chest and spoke Sarah's name softly. Then he placed his hand on the ground between them, showing the space he now stood in. He looked at Naya, unsure but honest. Naya listened. When he finished, she placed her hand gently on his shoulder. Her touch was steady, respectful. She nodded once. The past stays, but it does not own the future. That understanding settled deep inside him, not long after the test came. One afternoon, while returning from gathering supplies, Kiona froze suddenly. She raised her hand, signaling silence. Eli stopped at once. Taza crouched low. Voices carried through the air. Men, close. They moved quickly, slipping behind rocks and brush. From their hiding place, Eli saw 3 settlers riding slowly, scanning the land. One of them dismounted and studied the ground. Eli's heart raced. If he were found here, questions would follow, and questions often led to harm. The riders spoke among themselves. One laughed. Another shook his head. After a tense stretch of time, they mounted their horses and moved on. Only when the sound faded did Kiona relax. That night the fire burned low. The mood was serious. Naya spoke quietly to the others. Eli understood only pieces, but he understood enough. The world beyond their camp was closing in. Later, when the others slept, Eli sat awake. He felt torn. He did not want to bring danger to them. At the same time, the thought of leaving filled him with a deep ache. Before he could decide, Naya sat across from him. She spoke slowly, choosing words Eli could understand. "You stay," she said, "but you choose." The weight of that settled over him. Choice. For a long time, Eli had felt like life simply happened to him. Loss, pain, survival. Now, for the first time, he was being asked what he wanted. He did not answer right away. The next morning, he woke before dawn and walked alone. He stood on a rise overlooking the land. The wind moved softly through the grass. The sun began to rise. He thought of the ranch he had lost, the life that was gone, the man he used to be. Then he thought of the women, the care they had shown him. The way they had given him space to heal, to grow, to choose. By the time he returned, his decision was clear. He gathered them together and spoke slowly. "I stay," he said. "I learn, I help, I belong." Naya smiled. Taza's eyes lit up. Kiona nodded once, satisfied. From that day on, Eli's role changed. He trained with Kiona, learning how to protect the camp without drawing attention. He helped Naya plan movements, learning why certain paths were safer than others. With Taza, he practiced language, learning words that helped him express more than just needs. The bond between them grew deeper, but it remained careful and respectful. Nothing was rushed. Everything was built on trust. One evening, during a shared meal, an elder from another group visited their camp. The air grew tense. Outsiders always brought questions. The elder looked at Eli for a long moment. Then he spoke to Naya. She answered calmly, firmly. Eli waited, his hands steady, his posture open. After a long silence, the elder nodded. Later, Naya explained as best she could. Eli was known now, seen, not as an enemy, not as a burden, but as someone under their protection. The relief nearly brought Eli to his knees. That night, as the fire crackled and the sky stretched wide above them, Eli felt something he had not felt since before Sarah's death. Peace. Not the kind that comes from forgetting pain, but the kind that comes from accepting it and moving forward anyway. He was no longer the widowed cowboy left for dead on a trail. He was a man rebuilding his life, piece by piece, alongside 3 women who had changed his path simply by choosing compassion. And though challenges still lay ahead, Eli knew one thing with certainty. He was no longer walking alone. The land did not grow quieter just because Eli had chosen to stay. If anything, life became more demanding. The group moved more often now, sometimes staying only a few days in one place. Signs of other people were appearing more frequently: hoof prints, campfire remains, broken branches that did not belong to animals. The outside world was pushing closer, and everyone felt it. Eli took his role seriously. Each morning he rose early and checked the area with Kiona. She showed him how to notice small changes: stones that had been moved, grass pressed down too evenly, silence where birds should have been. These signs told stories, and Eli was learning to read them. His body grew stronger. His legs still reminded him of the past on cold mornings, but it no longer stopped him. His hands, once used only for ranch work, now learned new skills: repairing tools made from natural materials, setting simple traps, helping build shelters that blended into the land. Naya guided much of this work. She planned carefully, thinking ahead, always weighing risk against need. Eli respected her leadership. She never raised her voice, never demanded obedience. People followed her because she had proven again and again that she knew how to keep them safe. Taza stayed close to Eli more often now. She was quick to smile, quick to notice changes in mood. She asked him questions about his old life, about animals, about travel, about the strange customs of settlers. Eli answered honestly, never hiding the pain or the mistakes. One evening, while sitting near the fire, Taza asked a question that surprised him. She pointed to him, then to Naya and Kiona, then back to him, her brow furrowed. Eli understood what she was asking. He took a long breath. He pointed to his chest, then made a gesture of broken pieces coming together. He pointed to them again, then placed his hand flat over his heart. "I am here," he said softly. "With you." Taza smiled and nodded, satisfied. Not everyone felt the same calm. One afternoon, as the group rested near a narrow canyon, Kiona returned with urgent news. She had seen smoke in the distance, not a natural fire. A camp. Naya listened carefully, then made a decision. They would not approach. They would move away quietly before nightfall. As they packed, Eli felt a familiar pull of tension. He knew what camps like that often meant: people searching, people taking land, people who saw anyone different as a threat. As they traveled through the canyon, the path narrowed. The walls rose high on either side, blocking the wind. It was beautiful but dangerous. Sound carried easily here. Halfway through, they heard voices echoing ahead. Everyone froze. Naya raised her hand, signaling stillness. They waited, barely breathing. Two men appeared at the far end of the canyon. They were armed and talking loudly, clearly not expecting company. Eli's heart pounded. He knew these men would not understand his presence here. He also knew that running might make things worse. Naya moved first. She guided the group into a narrow side path, hidden by shadow and stone. They pressed themselves against the rock, invisible unless someone knew where to look. The men passed close by, their voices bouncing off the canyon walls. Eli caught pieces of their words, talk of land, of searching, of rumors about hostile groups. Eli felt anger rise, but he held it down. Anger was loud. Silence kept them safe. When the men were gone, the group waited a long time before moving again. That night the mood was heavy. Eli sat with Naya near the fire. He struggled to find the right words. "I bring danger," he said finally. Naya looked at him steadily. She shook her head. "Danger is already here," she replied. "You are not the cause." Her words mattered, but Eli still felt the weight of responsibility. He did not want to be the reason harm came to them. Days later, that fear became real. While gathering supplies near a water source, Taza spotted movement. Before anyone could react, a group of settlers emerged from behind the trees. They stopped short when they saw Eli. There was a long, tense silence. One of the men recognized Eli's clothing style. He stepped forward cautiously. "You alive?" the man asked, surprise clear in his voice. "We heard you were dead." Eli swallowed. He felt every eye on him, settler and Apache alike. "I'm alive," Eli said calmly. "I'm not looking for trouble." The man glanced at the women, suspicion clear on his face. "You with them now?" he asked. Eli straightened his back. He felt fear, but he did not let it show. "Yes," he said. "They saved my life." The settlers exchanged looks. One of them scoffed, another frowned. Naya stepped forward then. She did not speak much English, but she spoke with presence. She raised her hands slightly, a sign of calm, not threat. The tension stretched on. Eli could hear his own heartbeat. Finally, the man who had spoken first sighed. "We're moving through," he said. "No fight today." They backed away slowly, never turning their backs, then disappeared into the trees. Only when they were gone did Eli feel his legs shake. That encounter changed everything. The group knew now that secrecy alone would not be enough forever. Choices would have to be made. That night they held a long discussion. Voices were low but firm. Eli listened closely. He did not understand every word, but he understood the meaning. Their lives were becoming more visible. Naya turned to Eli and spoke clearly. "You stay," she said again. "But staying means standing with us." Eli nodded without hesitation. "I will," he said. From that moment his place was no longer quiet or uncertain. It was defined. He helped plan safer routes. He stood watch when needed. He learned when to speak and when silence was stronger. He followed their ways, not trying to change them, not trying to lead. Trust deepened. One evening, as they rested after a long journey, Naya placed a simple woven band in Eli's hands. It was made with care, each strand chosen with purpose. She tied it gently around his wrist. It was not a possession. It was a sign. Eli understood. He was no longer just protected by them. He was connected to them. As the fire burned low and the night wrapped around them, Eli felt the weight of his old life settle into memory rather than pain. The world outside still carried danger. The future was still uncertain. But whatever came next, he would face it with them, not as a man rescued, but as a man who had chosen to stand, protect, and belong. Time changed everything, but it did not erase the past. It softened it, shaped it, and made room for something new. Seasons passed. The harsh heat gave way to cooler winds, then returned again. Through it all, the small group endured. They learned when to move and when to stay. They learned which places welcomed them and which ones whispered danger. Life remained uncertain, but it was no longer fragile in the way it once had been. Eli was no longer seen as an outsider. His hands worked beside theirs every day. He helped gather food, repair shelters, and watch the land. He learned their customs slowly, carefully, never assuming, always listening. When he made mistakes, they corrected him without anger. When he succeeded, they acknowledged it with quiet approval. The widowed cowboy who had once wandered with nothing but grief now walked with purpose. People from nearby groups began to notice. Some were cautious, some were curious. They saw Eli not as a threat, but as a man who had chosen a different path. He did not try to explain himself. He did not argue. He let his actions speak. Naya remained the steady center of their lives. Her wisdom guided decisions. Her calm presence kept fear from growing too large. Kiona continued to protect the group, her sharp awareness keeping them one step ahead of trouble. Taza brought light into the quiet moments, her laughter reminding them that survival alone was not living. Eli's bond with each of them was different, but equally deep. With Naya, there was understanding built on shared loss and respect. With Kiona, there was trust earned through action and silence. With Taza, there was warmth and hope, a reminder that joy could still exist after sorrow. There was no single moment when everything changed. No grand announcement, no ceremony that marked a clear beginning. Instead, it happened slowly. One night, as the group sat together under a wide sky, Naya spoke to Eli in careful words. She spoke of shared responsibility, of family chosen, not forced. Of lives woven together by choice, not by chance. Eli listened closely. When she finished, he nodded. "I am here," he said simply, "for all of it." That was enough. From then on, their bond was understood by those who mattered. They shared work, shared shelter, shared decisions. Eli did not claim ownership, and neither did they. What they built was based on respect, trust, and care. The world beyond them did not always understand. Some settlers whispered stories, some spoke with judgment. Others simply shook their heads, unable to see beyond their own narrow views. But there were also those who saw something else, a group surviving together against difficult odds, choosing peace whenever possible. Eli learned to let the opinions of others pass like wind. He was no longer trying to fit into a world that had already taken everything from him. Years later, a traveler once asked him if he ever missed his old life. Eli thought carefully before answering. "I remember it," he said, "but I don't live there anymore." His memories of Sarah remained. He spoke her name sometimes, quietly, with respect. The pain of losing her never disappeared, but it no longer defined him. It existed alongside something new, something that gave meaning to his days. Love, he learned, did not replace what was lost. It grew around it. As time went on, Eli's story became one that people repeated, though often incorrectly. Some told it as a tale of rescue. Others spoke of bravery or strange choices. Few understood the truth. The truth was simpler. A broken man had been found by 3 women who chose compassion over fear. They gave him time, care, and a choice. In return, he gave loyalty, effort, and his whole self. Together, they built a life that did not follow the rules others expected, but it followed something deeper, mutual respect. In quiet moments, Eli often sat at the edge of camp and watched the horizon. He thought of the day he had nearly died on the trail. How close everything had come to ending before it truly began. He knew now that survival was not just about staying alive. It was about finding where you belong. The land continued to change. Settlements grew. Paths turned into roads. The old ways became harder to protect. But the values they lived by, care, patience, courage, remained strong. When danger came, they faced it together. When loss touched them, they grieved together. When joy found them, they shared it. Eli was no longer called the widowed cowboy. He was known as someone who listened. someone who stood firm without raising his voice, someone who honored the past but did not cling to it. And the three women were remembered not just for saving a man's life, but for choosing a future built on understanding. Their story did not end with fame or fortune. It ended with something quieter but far more lasting, a family formed by choice, a life rebuilt from compassion, and a reminder that sometimes the most powerful stories are not about conquest or victory, but about people who choose to see each other as human, even when the world tells them not to. In the end, Eli did not find the life he once imagined. He found something better. He found a place where his heart could rest,